Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to looking up adding items to a quote. So I'm going to show you the various ways you can do that. So the first option is going to be how do you get to your product list. There's a couple different ways. Obviously the easiest is going to be clicking on the products icon on your toolbar. It's going to be the fastest. It's going to open up the product lookup window. You can also get there by clicking on the products menu option and then choosing lookup. You can also click Control L and that'll get you there as well. We also have what's called the quick lookup here as well. The quick lookup will let you search for a specific item from the database from your document items screen. So if you only have one or maybe just a couple different databases that you use and you want to quickly add an item to your document, you can use a quick lookup to do that. So for instance, if I wanted to search for something in my Our Products database by the description of the item, so let's say I type in the word switch and I hit OK. QuoteWerks will automatically bring me to the product lookup screen and it'll default to the Our Products, which is what I set there, and then it fills in my description and then it found this item. If it had found an exact match, it would have actually added the item to my quote for me. So if it had found this item, if I had put in the manufacturer part number, it would just add it to the quote. If you just kind of do like a keyword search like I did, then it's just going to bring you to your search so you can make sure you identify the correct item you want to search for. From here, obviously you can change it to a different database or search by manufacturer part number or vendor part number. You can also add items in kind of like the autofill here on QuoteWerks on your document items screen. So this is a fairly new feature, something that a lot of people have asked for. They want to be able to add items directly by part number on the document items screen. So what you can do is in your manufacturer part number field, you actually see a drop-down list. Now the drop-down list is going to be specific to the database you have set here in your quick lookup. If you want to change it, you can change the vendor field next to it. So if you want to look by a specific vendor, you can just fill in the vendor there. So when you click on the drop-down, you can actually see a list of all the items from that specific either vendor set here or your product database set here.
Is that something new for 5.0?
That is definitely new in 5.0. That one I know for sure. And you can see I can just add the item, and when I add it, it automatically fills in the information from that one. Now you can even do a search from here. So I'm going to steal a part number here. So if I start to type in a part number, maybe I know the first part is 5.8. If I hold Shift on my keyboard and then click on the drop down, it'll actually limit it to the part numbers that start with 5.8. So it makes it an easy way to kind of just quickly add items. You know, if you know this part number, or you know at least the beginning of the part number, you can do it that way. Again, you can change the vendor. So if you have a different vendor you want to source items from, in our case, I'm going to go to our training database here. I can pull items from that training database instead. So the vendor is going to essentially be kind of like the master. So whatever you have set here is when it's going to show up here. If this is blank, then QuoteWerks will use whatever's set.
Can you just do the shift thing again? I'm sorry, I was trying to do it, and I wasn't looking at you, and I kind of missed what you were doing.
I had the same problem. I shifted and I...
Yeah, no problem. So basically you'll put in the start of the part number, or at least one character of the part number, then hold Shift on your keyboard, and then click on the drop down. And it'll limit it for you. Be able to get it to work?
Yeah.
Okay.
The vendor dropdown is also useful if you want to source an item from a different vendor, and maybe you have multiple vendors that sell the same items and you want to change it from vendor A to vendor B. You can just do it very quickly here by selecting the drop-down list. The vendor list is going to be all the vendors you have set up under your product lookup window, so all these vendors here, and then any vendors you've set up under your vendor maintenance, under your utilities vendor maintenance. Those are all going to show up as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and search for a couple items to add to our documents. I think we have quite a few people who are using Utilize. Yeah, so I'm gonna walk through using the new Utilize integration here. So Utilize is going to be specific if you're selling IT and even some telecommunications and AV parts. It's basically going to let you search in real time for items from like Tech Data, Ingram Micro, Synex, DNH. You can search by pretty much anything. You can search by manufacturer, part number, vendor, part number, product description, keyword. However you want to look for an item, you can do that. So if I wanted to look for a trip light switch, and I type that in, that's a pretty generic response, and that's going to give me pretty generic results. So I'm going to have 292 items to kind of filter through. QuoteWerks is going to display a list of different categories, manufacturers, and attributes that you can kind of filter your list down towards. So if I'm saying, okay, well, I know I need a specific family, so we're going to go to our product family, and I know it's the Net Director family. That'll limit it to 23, and you can see now there's 23. Then I'm going to have a list here of these different items that are available. Now, once I select a specific item, I can click on my real-time option here, and this will actually go out to the distributors using my account credentials to get my pricing and availability for this particular item. So this is going to use your account credentials, and it's going to highlight in green your best cost by default. It's also going to show you on the right-hand side the warehouse availability of that particular item for that vendor. And you can see the availability here in parentheses. So if you're using any of these vendors, you'll actually see what they're selling it for and which vendor has it in stock. There's a website link as well, so you can actually go to the website to view this specific item. If you see the vendor part number is highlighted in yellow, this means that that item is sold by that vendor. They might have two vendor items, which means one's a newer one, one's an older one. So we'll actually highlight in yellow, letting you know that the vendor part number could be different. So you'll be able to click on the drop down and change the vendor part number.
Is this connected to like the vendor's online inventory?
Yes.
And this is only available in real time?
Yeah, and it's only available for a select few distributors.
Is there a reason why I wouldn't have prices and the availability on my screen like yours? I have the vendors, I have the vendor part number, I have the website hyperlink, but I don't have the pricing or the availability.
Do you have, did you click on this icon? The real time button? That work for you?
Yeah.
So once you've located your item, you can also check list or retail pricing from CDW, Newegg, Staples, and even ProVantage and Dell, which I don't have listed here. If you click on that, that'll actually go out to those websites and show you what those items are currently selling for on those websites. Now this is giving you list pricing. Even if you have accounts with them, it's not going to give you your pricing with those accounts. It's just going to say, hey, if your customer went to go look there, this is probably what price they're going to see. So it just kind of gives you an idea of where you might want to sell that particular item. So once we're ready to add the item to our document, simply double click on it, and this will bring up your Add Item Assistant. So this is going to hold true no matter what items you sell. When you pick an item from QuoteWerks to add to your document, this Add Item Assistant window is going to open up. This is where you can adjust the quantity. You can just type in the quantity as well. This is also where you can adjust the price. Now, I have my default price modifier set, very early this morning before a lot of you had coffee. We set it for P10. That's my default. You can change that. You can manually type in here if you want to sell it for $1,500. If you want to sell it for $100, you can change that. If you want to mark it up from cost, you can mark it up from cost. It's going to be up to you. We just can set a default if you want to. If you click on the ellipsis button here, you can actually choose, if you don't remember what the difference between markup and margin is, you can set it here, and it'll automatically populate that shortcut for you. So our markup is just a straight markup from cost, saying I want to mark this up 15% from cost. Margin is saying, in this case, I want to make a 12% profit. I want a 12% profit margin. So that's always the way I remember it, is that the P stands for profit, M stands for markup. If you discount from list, you can do that as well. Just do a D, and that'll be discount from list, and then put in the percent amount, and that'll calculate your price based on the MSRP price. So in our case, we're just going to do a 12% markup. From here, you can actually check price history. So if you've sold this particular item to this specific customer that you have selected on your Sold To, Ship To tab, when you click on the price history, this will actually display the last time you sold this item, what the customer's price was, how many you quoted them, the date, cost, the modifier used, the document it was in, the document number it was in, all that information. So you can actually see if you had sold this item previously or quoted this item previously to this customer. Directly below it will be the price history for this item. This will show you anyone that you've sold this particular item to. It's extremely useful if you sell a lot of the same items over and over again. Maybe you gave someone a good deal last week, or maybe you just want to pass on savings to this customer. You can actually see what you had quoted this item previously to any other customer in the past.
And that holds that information into perpetuity.
You're right. And then down here is going to be your heading. So if you've added a heading line to your document in QuoteWerks, this is where you can actually specify where you want the document to appear. So if I go into QuoteWorks, well, I'm just not going to that, it's open, I can actually say, oh, you know, this is a product, add under my products heading. This is my service, add under my services heading. So it's nice if you already have the headings in your document prior to adding items to the document. So another thing that templates can be useful is if you say, you know, we sell services and products and hardware and these 5 different items, we set up these 5 different headings ahead of time. You could have a template that just had your headings listed, and that way you don't have to put them in before you start adding items to your document. So we'll go ahead and we'll add this item to our document. Now Utilize is also going to come with a couple other tabs. It's going to have your accessories tab, so this will be optional items, anything else you might want to include with this particular product or service. It's going to show up here. It'll typically be broken down into different categories. This one's going to have cables, rack mount LCDs, and services available. Some of the items will also have similar and upsell items, which let me see if we can find them. Yeah, here we go. So this one has a similar items tab. Similar items tab is just that. It's items that are very similar in functionality and usually price to the item that you're quoting. Upsell items are going to be items that are more expensive but also have more functionality. So if you wanted to do like a good, better, best on your quote, you could use the similar and upsell items to kind of offer the customer different options as well. And then the last tab is going to be your spec sheet tab. This will provide more technical information about this item, so if you want to include that to your customer, you'll be able to do that. So the last thing before we move on to one of the other databases to add items is going to be the compare window. So when you've selected an item, maybe you're not sure the differences, or maybe you want to give your customer an option to look at the different options. You can actually highlight multiple items by highlighting the item, holding control on your keyboard, and then selecting the different items. And then once you have them highlighted, right click, and there's going to be an option that says compare product features, and in parentheses it's going to say Utilize. And this is actually going to open up a new window. Let's resize it up. And it's going to highlight the differences between the items that you added to this window. And everything that's in yellow are differences. So I can actually undo that, and you can see it just has kind of like a spreadsheet format. So if you want to show the customer just for your own purpose, see what the differences are, you can see it's highlighted there, and it'll tell you obviously part numbers, all that information, the marketing descriptions, the technical information, ports, all that information, but in this case is going to all be different and shown here. From this window you can also check pricing and availability. So if you want to get pricing availability, you can actually get pricing availability across all 3 items in this case at one time. So you can actually see all the different prices. And this document, if you wanted to save this as a PDF, you could actually see here and save it as a PDF to the links tab. And this will remove the pricing and also the part number, so the customer doesn't see that. And it'll add it as a PDF to the links tab for you.
I do the comparison again, I'm sorry, I looked down.
Yeah, no problem. So you would simply highlight the items just by holding control,
Right.
and then right click, and there's an option that says compare product features, Utilize.
But this is only for certain CRMs, you said, right?
This is only if you are purchasing from like Tech Data, Ingram Micro, Synex, DNH, basically IT, telecommunications, AV.
Okay.
That's the only way you'll have that feature.
Correct.
So we do have a compare button, we don't have a compare feature.
Right. Any questions from any of the IT companies about using this feature? Alright. So let's go ahead and go to just our products database here. The Our Products database is going to let you search by manufacturer, vendor part number, description, manufacturer part number, or keyword. This is true for any native QuoteWerks database. So any database you've created in QuoteWerks, you're going to be able to search by all of these fields. If you're linking to a database, whether it's an Excel file or linking to like a ConnectWise or Autotask or Salesforce database, you're not going to have as many options. You're typically going to be able to search by the description and the part number. Some of them you might be able to search by the vendor part number also, but typically it's going to be those fields. When you're searching for an item, obviously it's going to be whatever information you put in there is going to return back your results. If you have multiple databases set up in QuoteWerks, you can use the multiple database search option up at the top. And again, if you're not on 5.0, you're not going to see this. This is going to show you, this is going to basically let you search all of your databases that you've set up in QuoteWerks at one time. You can specify that over here on the right hand side where it says choose databases. And if you click on that, this will actually let you specify which databases you want to search through. So if I want to search through my services, my test, and my training, I can then type in the word switch, and it's going to return back any of the items that have the word switch in their database for those different vendors. You can see the list of vendors right here. So this is a nice feature if you do have multiple vendors that you purchase items from, and they sell very similar items. You can actually do that in multiple database search. Any questions about searching for items? Before I close out of here, does anyone have any questions about products or services in general? No? Alright. We will move on. Alright, now that we have items in our document, we're going to work on making changes to that. So when you have your items on the document items tab, you can obviously move items around. You can cut, copy, paste. You can also drag and drop. So if you weren't aware of that, I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So you select your item, basically left click on your mouse, and you're just going to drag it up in this blue space. So when you see that little icon there, it's going to let you quickly drag and drop items around the document. So if you need to move things into different heading options or just move things around the document, that's the easiest way to do it, at least in my opinion. If you right click, you'll see there is an option for cut, copying, and pasting. So if you want to cut an item or copy an item, you can do that. You can cut, copy, and paste into other quotes as well. So if you have multiple quotes open and you say, oh, I need this item in this other quote, you can copy that information into other quotes also. So right clicking is going to give you a few other options. There's a select special. For any of you that need to highlight maybe specific items on the document, maybe you want to mark them up, maybe there's specific services, you need to make changes to it. The select special will let you do that. It'll actually let you select items based on essentially a field. In this case, we're going to look at the manufacturer part number begins with, let me see if I have any of that, but the same, I don't. What we do, item type begins with product, and you can see that then it highlights those two items for me. So it's very useful if you have a larger quote where you have a lot of items and you want to update items at once. You can actually tell QuoteWerks which items to highlight based on that select special. So again, that's right click, select special, and then you choose the column that you want to basically search on.
Brandon, you right clicked, did you highlight a line? And then,
It did automatically, but you don't have to.
just as long as you're in the quote, if you
Right.
right click?
Exactly. As long as you're in this document items here, you can right click and then choose select special. You don't actually have to select line.
Okay.
It'll highlight like the vendor, whatever you want it to highlight.
Right. Well, it'll highlight the line items based on your selection. So in this case, I said I have two item types of product. So I said, okay, look for item type begins with Pro, and then it highlights those two items for me. And that way I can make changes. So now we can get into the actual changes of the line items. So everyone should know that QuoteWerks is pretty flexible with pricing and making changes on the fly. So you can adjust quantity, change your description. If you double click in the description field, this will show you your entire item's description. As we talked about earlier, the description field is 32,000 characters or about 30 pages of text per line item. So you won't run out of room ever. That should never be a problem. This is also where you can adjust your cost. If you need to set your new price modifier, change your price manually, any of that, you can do that here. If you didn't set a price modifier and you want to, I can type one in. So if I want to set that as, markup or a margin of 12, I can do that. You can see if I highlight this item, it'll actually show my profit margin up here, and I can even see multiple items at once. And It'll update as I select those different items. If you don't select any items, it'll show your entire profit margin across the entire document. You can also change the profit margin on multiple items at once. So if you highlight them and you want to change your price modifier, right-click after your highlighted items. So in this case, you are going to highlight them first to make changes to multiple items, and then right-click and select Apply Price Modifier. And then I can change this. Maybe we want to do a markup of 15%. And hit OK, and then you can see those two line items have been updated with a 15% markup. And that'll obviously update your price as well. You can do that with cost. You can even do that with quantity. So if you wanted to change the quantity of these items at once, you can right-click and choose Apply Quantity. And let's just change it to 4. Those two items will now have a quantity of 4.
The other thing is have an automatic spell check where it's active instead of having to double click and go to that screen.
I don't. Maybe. We're doing some new update stuff. It might be in there, but I'm not sure. All right. So right-clicking will give you a few other options. Does anyone have any questions about changing pricing or editing line items from here? We're getting to line attributes. No? Alright, so right-clicking gives you a few other options. You can insert a blank line, so if you need to add an item on the fly, you can use a blank line for that. You can also insert a comment line. Comment line is going to be text only. It's not going to be any quantity associated with it, no pricing associated with it. It's basically if you want to put in an additional description about a line item in the document, or maybe about a service you offer, or just something that you want to put in the document, you can use a comment line for that. We can also use a heading line, which is what we talked about earlier. Heading lines are how we organize our documents in QuoteWerks. This is where you can basically break out the document into different sections. So, for instance, maybe we want to say, okay, we offer our customers products. Let's go ahead and insert a product heading. And we also offer services. So I'm going to right-click again, choose Insert Heading, and choose Services. So what this is going to do on my quote is actually kind of organize the document for myself, but also for my customer, so the customer can clearly see, okay, these are the product items, these are the service items. Your heading lines can be whatever you want. You can call them products, services, you can call it hardware, software. You can say, hey, this is for room 1, this is for room 2, this is for location 1, location 2. You can use the heading lines in any way that you want to. It's not limited to what I showed here.
On the headings and let's say the comments, where do you change the font? Let's say on that.
The font is actually going to be changed in the layout itself. And it gets a little complicated because you would have to, if you specify a section in the layout, you can actually tell it, hey, when it's a specific line type, such as a comment, have a font that equals this. It's not something that you can kind of change on a quote-to-quote basis. You kind of have to, when you set it up, choose. My comment lines are always going to be italicized.
That's my question. Where do you set that up?
Yeah, it's we'll probably have to talk about this offline. Okay. But basically, in your layout, you would go to your section, and you essentially choose your description. And when you choose the description line, there's a font option, and you can change the output. We actually are going to go over templates later today, and so we'll discuss them. But it's a little more complicated than just change the font here. It's you actually have to go into the layout designer too.
So, Miss, is there a difference in headings and comments?
Headings are typically going to be smaller. It's how you're organizing your document into different sections. Comments would be usually multi-word, maybe even multi-lines, where you just want to put more text about maybe a specific offering or just something in the document that you want to point out.
Where do you edit? How do you edit heading?
Just right-click, and you can choose Insert Heading. Any other questions about comments or heading lines? No? Okay. Alright, so we're going to go to adding subtotals. So in every section of your document or any place in the document, you can actually subtotal out different sections of the document by right-clicking on the last line item in the document and then clicking on Add Subtotal. The last line item you click on, we're gonna put the subtotal underneath it, so that's why you always wanna make sure you want to run the subtotal underneath that specific item. You can run multiple subtotals on your document, and this will calculate basically all the line items above it until it either gets to the top of the document or another subtotal line. Subtotal is automatically going to populate the text here, but you can change this. In this case, if you want to call this your product subtotal or your product's total or room 1 total, you can change that. So if you wanted to change the way this looks or the text involved there, you can do that. But by default, it's always going to read as subtotal when you first add it into the quote. There's also an option to run a running subtotal. A running subtotal will basically ignore any other subtotals in the document, and it'll give you a subtotal up to that point wherever you're running that in the document. So it's good if you want to say, if you have a very large quote, and let's say customer maybe has like a $10,000 limit, or if that's their deposit, and you want to see which line items it's going to start at, you could put a running subtotal in there, and it won't mess with the other subtotals you might have in the document. And then if you want to delete items on a document, you can see here I just highlighted them, and then I always just hit delete on my keyboard, but you can also right click and choose delete line, and you can delete multiple or single line items on the document. Percent discount and percent charge line items. This is extremely useful if you want to add a percent discount to your customer. Maybe they're a very loyal customer, so you're going to give them a 10% discount. The important thing to know with the discount lines are, if you want to give a discount on the entire document, you need to run a subtotal first. So if I want to say, okay, here's your subtotal, it's $3,500, and then I want to give them a 10% discount, I need to run the subtotal line first, and then I can add my 10% discount, and that'll calculate correctly. If you don't add the subtotal, let's move this up here, your discount line is just going to look at the line right above it and give you the discount on that one single line. So if you don't want to show the customer this subtotal line, I'm about to show you how you can hide individual line items in the document. But that's important to note that if you're going to run any kind of discounts on the entire document, make sure you run a subtotal first and then run the discount on the line. And again, you can change this text if you want to call it, fantastic customer 10% discount. You can add that on there.
Brandon, when I export these to QuickBooks, it tells me that I can't. QuickBooks won't read the subtotal. And I have to go back and pull out the subtotals. It's the only way that I know how to.
Mapping, right?
Yeah, there's a mapping under the mappings tab, and then an item subtab, and there's a subtotal with a drop down, and you have to map that to a specific item type that would match your QuickBooks. If that's not mapped or not correlated correctly, that would be why we made that error. So if you have QuickBooks and QuoteWerks, we can take a look at that.
So does that go back to that feature request where I was asking about before you export to QuickBooks, if there's certain types you can exclude from the export?
Yeah, that would be.
Like headers, subtotals, you really just want to exclude all that for quote purposes, but, okay.
Yeah, I know it's subtotal, comments, discount line items,
And charge.
and charge.
Charge item. If anyone wants to show.
Yeah, I don't think headings is part of it, but headings will go over to QuickBooks actually.
Headings will, comments will.
It all goes
Headings
over.
will and comments will, yeah, okay.
So subtotals will if you know what you're doing. Don't make fun of me.
At percent charge works the exact same way as the discount, it's just a charge. So if your customer's going to pay with a credit card, say, hey, we're going to charge you a 3% credit card fee. You can do a percent charge. Maybe there's an annoying customer, so you're going to charge an extra 10%. That's a good way to do it as well. If you do that, you might want to hide that line item on the document though. But it does the exact same thing, and again, it's customizable. So
How do you hide things on the document, but then the price shows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can do it so the price doesn't show also.
Well, but they would have to know the price if they're gonna be paying, right?
It shows up with the total.
Oh, just,
Yeah, you can hide the individual line items pricing. I'm going to show you that here, but it's actually where we're going next. So you can do things like this. Very useful if you're ever doing groups or anything like that, where you don't want the customer to see the individual prices of items. Say, hey, we're just selling this as a package deal. This is what the total is, instead of them, saying, oh, I'm gonna pay $10 for that, but I can buy it at Walmart for $4 or whatever. Alright, any questions about comment lines, heading lines, percent discounts, percent charges, anything like that?
Summary only, is that?
The summary line is useful if you offer like a, well, the way we do it here is we have a maintenance for the software. And it's 20% of your license cost. So we can actually calculate if you do any kind of renewals that's based on something else. So if you say, we charge a 10% service fee based on your order total or something like that, that's what the summary line can be used for. So it's kind of
Is
like
it added down at the bottom?
it does, yeah. Yeah, so if I said, okay, it's gonna be a summary, it says add up the extended price where the item type is, we'll say, product, and then multiply, we'll say 10%. And that'll basically say, okay, my two products were however much, and then times 10% is $60, so we're charging a 10% fee for those two items.
Brendan. On the add percent charge, is there a way to edit the item type and add additional item types into that drop-down menu?
Yes, the item types are going to be pulled from this item type field on your document items tab.
Oh, okay.
So if you hit F2 on your keyboard and just double click, you can add more as needed. You can't add them from that actual field, but you can add them.
Okay, thanks.
Alright, so next we're going to go to the line attributes. So the line attributes in QuoteWerks are how you determine essentially how an item is displayed in the quote in QuoteWerks, how an item shows up. So if you highlight a single line item or multiple line items, you can change their line attributes at one time. So I'm just going to do one, and we're going to right click and choose Edit Line Attributes. And then you're going to see all the different options here. So the first option is the item optional, yes or no? If an item is set as optional, it'll show up on the quote for the customer, but it's not going to be included in your quote total unless you check this box for is selected. So this means it is selected, it is included in that quote total. On the PDF document, it will show in green, it will say, hey, this item is optional, and it'll say in parentheses, is selected, or if you leave it unchecked, it'll say, I think, not included in total, or something like that, if you're the default text is. If you're using Quote Valet, this will create a checkbox next to the item on the Quote Valet document. So this will actually show up, when you set an item as optional, it'll show a checkbox next to the item on Quote Valet, and it'll say, hey, the customer can select or deselect this item. If you want to already have it selected for the customer, just choose the checkbox is selected, and it'll already be checked for the customer, and then the customer can deselect it. If any of you offer different options for your customer where they say, hey, you can, here's group A, here's group B, here's group C, choose one of the three. You can assign items to exclusive groups, and you can type whatever you want. So you can just call this group or warranties, if you're offering different warranties or different services. And when you assign multiple items to the same group, there'll actually be a radial button next to those items in Quote Valet, so the customer has to choose one or none. This is only, the exclusive group is only going to be for your Quote Valet users, so if you're not using Quote Valet, you can just kind of ignore me for the next 15 seconds. You'll see here when you click on the drop down, you can assign items to multiple groups, so if you want to make sure that you're assigning to the same one instead of having to type it in, just click on the drop down and it'll show you a list of the group names that you've already created. So this one we're just going to say it's not exclusive, it's just optional. From here, we can also change the tax code. So if an item is taxable or non-taxable, you can change that. We can also hide the price. So this is where we're talking about, you don't want to show the individual prices of your items. This is where we can actually go through and choose to hide or show the price. High quantity, extremely useful if you offer any kind of services or anything that's like an hourly charge or like labor or installation or travel or anything like that. Hiding the quantity is really nice because instead of showing the customer how many hours you're charging them for, you can just show labor is this much, installation is this much, and they won't see that it's 12 hours and then they try to negotiate with you saying, oh, you guys can probably do it in an hour and a half. So it just can save a little bit of a headache. Exclude line. If you have something on the document that you don't want the customer to see and you don't want to include in the quote total, Maybe you're using an item as like a kind of a reference point or something else, you're building a custom quote or something, you can use exclude line. In reality, you probably won't ever use this attribute, but it's there if you need to.
Does that show up in this view if you exclude line, or does it show like a special so you know that line's excluded?
Yeah, it'll actually be grayed out. You can still click on it and modify it, but it'll just, the color will be gray. That's a good question.
These things that you're going through right now, is it specific for each proposal or each quote?
Yes.
So it would be the user that's doing the quote that would have to do this?
Correct. Your items can have default line attributes in their product database, and then you can just customize them as needed on a per quote basis. Print line, if you don't want an item to show up on the document, you can hide it. Most useful when you have items grouped together, which we'll go over here in just a second. So if you group items together and you want to sell them as a package and not show an individual line item, you can choose not to print the individual line item. Print picture, if you have pictures for your items, you can choose whether or not they show up on the document. And then anyone that has any recurring charges, so if you have any kind of weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annual charges, this is where you can set that item as recurring on a quote-by-quote basis. So you can actually say, okay, is this item recurring? Yes. Choose the billing cycle. It's weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annual, so it's going to be monthly. And then we can choose a cycle basis. So the cycle basis means, does it start at the beginning of the cycle, which would be beginning of the month, beginning of the year, beginning of the quarter kind of thing, or is it a specific date? You know, is it starting today, which is the 24th? If you're going to be using recurring, this is a very important checkbox for you, because if you leave this unchecked, you're actually telling QuoteWerks that the customer gets that first payment for free, so that they're not having to pay for the first one. So if you leave this unchecked, you add this recurring item, and you're saying, hey, my quote's off by $106, can't figure out why, it's probably because this was unchecked. So if you want to give it to them for free, that's fine, you know, that's what that's there for, but for the most part, you'll probably want to check that because you want them to pay each month or each year, whatever you set to that.
And this is like individual by line. We had something set up in our database that would say we imported a desk, it automatically has an assembly fee, which would import with it, but it never showed up. Like we could see it go in, but it didn't show up on the quote, but it was included in the price.
That's called a required item. We probably won't talk about those today.
But that's what we can add, like if you wanted, like if you're wanting a certain thing to show up every time for that product that comes in, you wouldn't do it here, but you have to do it.
Right.
You do that in
The product database, yeah. In the product database, every line item has the list of these attributes, so you can default them, so you don't have to set them each time. This is really just to show you how you can change it on a quote basis.
Hey, Brandon,
Yes.
could you go back to the high price or high quantity?
Sure.
Do the drop down? What's the difference between the no and no change?
No change means that it doesn't change your setting. So if you had previously had it set to no, and then you do no change.
But if I changed it to yes, does it change my settings then?
No, it just changes for that line item.
Just for that line item?
Yeah. The no change is really if you're selecting multiple items and you're changing a bunch of different things, so you don't forget saying, I don't want to change this one, I don't want to change this one. You can kind of set it as a reminder, so you're saying, okay, don't change this one, don't change this one. Because it can be kind of confusing if you're going through, because some of them it says, show this, hide this, you know, and it says, show this, yes, hide this, yes, you know, so it can be a little confusing. So we put the no change in there so that you can say, okay, don't change these fields. So these are the ones I'm going to focus on. And then your contract dates, this is going to use the contract dates from the document set on the sale info tab. Remember when we talked about that, we showed the contract dates on the sale info. If you want to specify the dates, you can also just set them here. And then the last thing that we're going to do is show you how to group items manually. So when you have items on the document, if you want to sell them as a package, you can highlight the items, and they do need to be in order. You can't say, okay, I want to take this item and this item and group them together. It's not going to work. They need to be all three or just the top two. And you need to have at least two to make a group. So to group these together, you're going to right click and choose Convert to Group, or do Control G. And when we do that, it's going to bring up this Convert Selected Items to Group option. And then you can actually set it to recurring. So if any of you do hardware as a service, this is where you can actually set that up so the customer can see how much they would pay for it on a monthly basis instead. In our case, we're just going to go ahead and hit OK. Anytime you see highlighted yellow like this, that means that this is a group or a bundle in QuoteWerks. The first line is going to be the kind of like the customer-facing description, the bundle name or the group name. So if I wanted to call this our entertainment package, that's what the customer would see. And you'll see over here on the right, our pricing is grayed out. Anytime you see grayed out pricing, that means it's hidden from the customer. The customer's not going to see the individual prices of these items. They'll still see the individual items, but they're not going to see the individual prices. Now, if I didn't want them to know that I'm selling them this really old TV, I just want them to buy it, I can go into my line attributes and choose print line no, and then it won't show up in the document. It'll still be included in the total, but it's not going to be included in the quote. So anytime you bundle items together on the fly like that, automatically prices for the individual items are clear.
So I know you can make a bundle like that, you know, with the bundles, but when you make it like this, does it save it?
It does not. That's a good question, yeah.
So if you make it through the bundles, you can save it?
Correct. Yeah, this is basically doing a bundle on the fly.
Right.
If you want to remove items from the group, you can drag them out of there. So you can shorten your group, or you can even add other items to the group just by dragging and dropping. You can also revert the items back to individual items just by deleting the header line. If I delete the header line, the items will go back to being individual items in QuoteWerks. Does anybody have any questions about that?
I always just want to see what it looks like on the quote.
Sure. Alright, so let's go ahead and group these items together.
So when the heading line comes in, you go ahead and put a description in there?
Correct. Which is what I forgot to do. So, in this layout, this one's already bolded, and then it shows the individual items. I've changed a bunch of settings, so that's probably not the best one to do.
How do you get that description line to show up? I guess that's where I'm at.
Which one?
Well, I'm using my quote, and I've got four lines together. They're all, and I'm calling them shelving. That is what I typed into the description. But when I go to the quote, to the delivery, that description doesn't show up. How do?
Because it's a special line type, it may be hidden on your layout. You'd have to look at your layout to see. You might have some formulas that are showing hiding different item types. It gets kind of confusing with that, so that may be the reason why it's not showing.
How do you ungroup them? Just delete it?
Yep, just delete that header line, and they'll go back to the way they were. Last thing before we pause for lunch, you have your buttons up here, the best, latest, and compare. This is useful to refresh pricing on any existing items in your document. You quoted out a customer, they come back to you 6 months later and say, hey, we're ready to move forward. Instead of having to rebuild the quote or refresh it, instead of rebuild it and refine all those items, you can refresh it using these icons. Best is going to source it from the best cost vendor. So if you have multiple items, or you have multiple vendors that sell the same items, when you click best, it'll look up the vendor, see which one has best, and give you your best cost here. You probably won't use that one that much. Usually you'll use latest and compare. Latest will give you the latest price from the selected vendor. So in this case, our products is my vendor. If I click latest, it's just going to refresh my pricing with my latest. So if I had any pricing changes, it'll update it here. Compare will let you compare in like a grid format between your different vendors. So you can actually see which vendor has the best cost, which one has the best price with stock if you're using real time. It'll show you that so you can see which
So we'll
vendors
show
are
you
sourcing
stock
from.
availability, because that's usually a key point when you come back 6 months or 3 months later.
Exactly.
Is there still stock from that vendor?
Right,
Where-
so that's where you can do that. You can also, for the IT companies, you can also access Utilize from here, that's what this button's for, and this will open up the Utilize panel, but you'd have to do every individual item, where the compare will just let you do all at once.
So
and then
where-
open up.
Where would it pull that from? Is it a spreadsheet that you imported in there? Or is it the actual quotes?
It's the product databases that you've set up in QuoteWerks, so the
Okay.
price files you've set
Yeah.
up in QuoteWorks.
Okay.
So if you only have one, just use latest.
Yeah.
The compare button's not gonna do anything for you, but if you have multiple, then you can use compare.
Okay.
Alright, I think this is a good place to stop, since lunch is here.